Hello, today at Second Robotics I'm going to show you guys how to solder your little mini badges. Right now I'm going to kind of go through all the tools that you might need to do that. One, I have a pan of ice to kind of hold the circuit board when we get started. I have tweezers. They're very fine tip ESD tweezers, so they can pick up the very small components like this 555 timer chip. And then also we have flux pen, which is always nice, and then a little acid brush to clean up the circuit once we're done soldering it. I have a brass sponge and a soldering iron, and we are going to do it by hand as well, and you do of course need some solder as well to get started. And then okay, next we're going to go over some of the components and then start soldering. Okay, we're going to start soldering to the board. So first you need to go ahead and try to secure the board in your pan of ice. I like to lay it flat so that when I set the surface mount components on there, they don't really move around on me. So if you can try doing that as well. So go ahead and take some flux, and you can basically just flux every pad that is there. We're just going to do the smaller components in this section and then kind of move on. So first we'll start with the R1 and R3, which are 100 ohm resistors for the LEDs. And you can go ahead and put both of those on the board. And what I found works best after you get your soldering iron online is to go ahead and tin your tip, right? So kind of just housekeeping of making sure your tip is clean. So apply a little solder to your soldering iron and then make sure it's super clean. And then once you start putting down a component, you can just preload your soldering iron with a little and then hold down the component that you're trying to work with and just tack one side, right? You can kind of nudge it into position. And then once you're done with that, you go ahead and come in and solder the opposite side of the resistor in this case. And then you can clean up the other side if you so choose. Okay, and then you just continue that with every component on the board. I'll show you some of the more major ones, and then it's basically the same procedure. So go ahead and clean your tip, preload a little, not a lot, hold down what you're trying to work with, and then solder the other side. Okay. And then you can come in and fix the opposite side if you so choose. Alright, that's two of the components. Some of the other components that we have are the capacitors. There's actually two of them, C1 and C2. C2 is a 22 microfarad, I believe, and it is a little larger than the other one. It's not actually going to have markings on it, so just kind of compare the sizes of the two packages. You should be able to figure out which one C2 is. So again, preload your soldering iron, and then once you have the component in place, tack down one side and then finish off the other. Okay. And then we also have the LEDs. The LEDs, the important thing to remember about the LEDs is it's going to be really hard to see on here, but there's actually a line and a dot, and that's the polarity of the LED. We just need to make sure the dot lines up with what it shows on the board. That way that, you know, when the circuit is activated, the LED actually lights and it's getting the proper voltage from the side. Oop, I just lost that LED. That's fine, I'll find it. But remember, the dot lines up with the board, and then go ahead and put that into place. And really the LEDs, you just have to be careful. The top surface of them are a little fragile in that, you know, you can burn it if you leave the iron on there long enough. But it's just like every other component you hold down, you can tack aside and then move on to the other side as well. So, and then you can even come back and correct one of the sides. So you just need to take your time when you're doing it. Just be patient so you can get them where you want it. So go ahead and start with the other LED as well. So once I clean the tip, preload, and then go ahead and tack one side down. Okay, not sure if I got it, we'll try again. Okay, yep, got it that time. And then other side. Okay, and then the last kind of major component I'm going to show, and you can do the same for the rest of the resistors and capacitors on board, is the 5.5 timer. And it's important just to kind of get that one lined up as best you can. In this one, try to just tack one leg down if you can. So once you get one leg in the position, you can kind of finesse it into place. And then just leave it, and then you can go ahead and do one pin at a time. Okay, and then do the opposite side. Now if you do end up, I'll do it real quick for you, if you end up actually bridging a connection like so, you use too much solder, that's fine. You can just come in here and kind of, if you wick off the solder with the soldering iron, that's one way to do it. So you just have to be really quick with it, and then now you don't have a bridged connection. It may be dirty, but we'll fix that later. And then you can kind of come in here and clean these up as well by just kind of having the soldering iron heated up and kind of form it into shape. So that's it for that, and then you can go ahead and finish out R2 and R4, which if we check the schematic, R2 is going to be the 1K resistor and R4 is the 100K. And then if we go ahead and look at those, the 1K ohm resistor actually shows on the package of 1000, well, the number 1001, and then for the 100K resistor, I believe it is 104. Yep, 104. So if you have a 104 resistor, that is going to be where the 100K goes for R4, and then that should finish it out. In the next section, I'll show you how to put on the major components such as the battery holder, switch, and the actual tie back, and then we'll test the circuit and then clean it as well. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with some of the larger components now of the board. First thing to do would be to go ahead and fill the top pad where the battery makes contact with the board, and then as well as fill these surface connectors with some solder. It'll take quite a bit, and then once you have those good, we can go ahead and move on to putting down the battery connector. Okay, so here is the battery connector, and then we have the surface of the board. We're going to go ahead and line up the profile of the battery so that we can insert the battery from here. Again, we've already pretty much preloaded the solder on the outside joints, so we'll just go ahead and tack them down and then get the battery holder in position and tack down the other side. Okay, that should be it. And then we want the brass pin tack for the badge. Go ahead and insert that and then fill around with solder. Doesn't take a lot, but you do want enough that it's gonna stay there, so try to get into the side of it. And then that's all you need for the brass tack. And then the last we need to do is put on the switch. Oh, it's still a little warm. Go ahead and put on the switch, which really it just lines up with the pads. The easiest thing I've found to do when making these is just go ahead and tack down the actual go ahead and tack down solder onto where the switch contacts are. And then you just follow up with the switch. If you can either hold it with a tool or your hands, however you feel comfortable. And you should be able to just tack down each contact with the switch. Okay, and then if you don't quite like them, you can always come back in and clean up one at a time, like so. Okay, there's going to be a lot of yellow discoloration on the board. That is mainly due to the flux. And that's okay. It will affect the circuit, but it's best to test first by go ahead and put the battery in and then switch it on and see if we get any result. And we got nothing because we forgot about our shorted contact on the 555 timer. So if we come in here and get rid of that. Okay, now our circuit should work. Okay, so I found a problem when I was working with it there at the end, trying to get it to work, that the actual battery wasn't contacting the surface of that contact. So just make sure you put a little bit more solder on there, and then we'll go ahead and add the battery again and give it another test. And there we go. Alright, so I went ahead and cleaned up the board as best I could with some isopropyl alcohol, and it looks really nice there at the end. That was the same board we were working with earlier there at the end with the major components, so you can get it to look nice. It's just that flux that really kind of makes all of that look not so great. So the last thing to do is go ahead and place the battery back in. Remember, positive goes up, and then you have a working blinky badge. So, and then it also comes with a tie back so you can wear it as well. Okay, thanks a lot, guys.